Can UCLA still make the playoffs? Maybe. Let's talk about it right now and see what the possibilities are. Welcome back, everyone. Before we hop into the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That way you can get up-to-date college football content and be able to stay in the know, especially on the western side of things with college football. And then pretty soon here, I'm going to try and start adding in the college basketball videos as well, as that's about to go underway. So what I want to talk about today was UCLA making the playoffs. Because I've seen out there that there are people saying that UCLA still controls their own destiny to be able to make the playoffs. And I can understand why people are saying that, because right now, mathematically, UCLA can still make it to the Big Ten title game. And if they can make it to the Big Ten title game and be able to win that, then people are assuming that the Big Ten champion will get an automatic berth into the playoffs. But that just isn't the case. So let me pull up the rules here on the college football playoff website, and let's talk about what that says. So on here, it says the 12 participating teams will be the 5 highest ranked conference champions plus the next 7 highest ranked teams, which will make up the 12 teams. So with that doesn't mean the Big Ten champion automatically gets in. It's only the 5 highest ranked teams. And we're just assuming that the Big Ten champion is going to be one of the 5 highest ranked. But if UCLA wins it, that's not a guarantee that they will be the highest ranked. So let's talk about why that is. First, let's start with their remaining schedule and see where we're going to end up if they can win out the rest of their games. So their first game this week will be against Indiana, who is the number 2 ranked team in the country according to the AP poll. And then they will play Nebraska and then play Ohio State, which is the number 1 ranked team in the nation, Washington, USC, and then if they win all those games, it would probably go to the Big Ten championship game, depending on how everything else played out, and with the tiebreakers and everything else. So with that, you would think like, okay, they beat the number 1 team in the nation. Sorry, this is if they win all the games. They beat the number 1 team in the nation. They beat the number 2 team in the nation. They won the conference championship for the conference, who has won the last couple of national titles. So of course, they're going to be one of the 5 highest ranked teams. But the only problem is UCLA will have 4 losses at that point. So I was looking at the college football playoff rankings from last year, and in the final rankings before the playoffs, they didn't have any teams that had 4 losses in the playoffs, in the top 25 for the playoffs. So that brings up the question, if they beat the number 1 and number 2 team, and say in the Big Ten championship game they play Oregon, and at that point, let's say Oregon's 4 or 5. So they beat the 1, 2, and 4 team in the nation. Now, obviously, that hasn't happened in the past, which is why you haven't had any 4-loss ranked teams in the college football playoffs. So that would be unprecedented. So I would imagine that they would at least be in the top 25. But the question is, would they be one of the top 5 highest ranked conference champions? So with the top 5 conference champions, assuming that UCLA wins the Big Ten championship, runs the table, wins the Big Ten championship, we're going to say the SEC, their champion, only has like 1 or 2 losses, maybe 3, but probably 1 or 2, the way it's going to shake out. So that's 1. The ACC will have someone up there. The Big 12 will have someone up there. So that's 3 right now. And so the question is, can that Big Ten championship team in UCLA beat out 2 of the other group of 5 conferences? And that's who's going to be really standing in their way. So, and I don't think that UCLA could be ranked above some of these conference champions depending on how they finish the season. So here's a list of teams that is in UCLA's way and is out of UCLA's control. And I'm going to explain why that is. All right, so you got 4 conferences vying for that last automatic berth spot. You'd had the Big Ten, Mountain West, Sun Belt, and American Conference. So we'll start with the Sun Belt. They have James Madison. They only have 1 loss. So could you rank UCLA over a 4-loss UCLA over a 1-loss James Madison? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what the committee would do with that. Now let's get a little bit more difficult with some of these other conferences. So, also just a note, for the group of 5 teams, I just pulled all the 0 and 1 loss teams. That's who's on here. So let's look at the Mountain West. What's interesting is UCLA is 0-2 against the Mountain West. They've already lost 2 games to UNLV and New Mexico. So if there's a 1-loss team out of the Mountain West, which could be San Diego State UNLV, could they be ranked above them? If it's UNLV, they definitely can't be ranked above UNLV because UNLV has the head-to-head. And I'd imagine San Diego State would have to be ranked above them because San Diego State would only have 1 loss, and UCLA had lost 2 games to the Mountain West so far this year. But again, you can make an argument at this point they could have beat the 1, 2, and maybe like ranked 4 or 5 team in the nation. So take it how you will. But I don't think they could be ranked above a 1-loss Mountain West team with those 2 losses to the Mountain West. That's just too much to put them over. So if in this scenario, I don't think they'd be ranked above the Mountain West. So now it comes down to, could they be ranked above someone from the American Conference? So with the American Conference, we got Navy, Tulane, South Florida, North Texas, and Memphis. So most of these teams do have a win against a Power 5, Power 4 conference team, like USF beat Florida, Memphis beat Arkansas. Tulane actually beat two of them, which interesting enough, Tulane was able to beat Northwestern, but then UCLA lost to Northwestern. So that argument would be really hard to make for UCLA to be ranked above, say it was Tulane who won out. And so at that scenario, let's just play with that scenario for a minute. Let's say UNLV and Tulane won the rest of their games along with UCLA. I don't see any world where UCLA can properly be rated above Tulane and UNLV. And in that case, the Big Ten championship, I don't think would get an automatic berth to the playoff. You'd have the Mountain West and the American champion above the Big Ten champion. Now, again, this is all just big hypothetical what ifs. UCLA has to go out in the field and they have to go win these games, which is going to be really hard because they play some really good teams. But it's just interesting to think about. Another interesting to think about, too, is like the blowback that would happen if this scenario played out. Like, can you imagine the Big Ten and all the Big Ten fans if UCLA didn't make the playoffs or they weren't one of those automatic berths and UNLV and Tulane made it over them? Like, they would be upset. But can you also imagine if the playoff committee decided to put a 4-loss UCLA over a head-to-head matchup with UNLV or a common opponent with Tulane that Tulane was able to beat? Like, no one would trust the playoff committee ever again. They would just say it's a big brand bias, and that it doesn't matter if you're a group of 5 team, no matter what you do, you just don't have a fair shot making the playoff. And it would get very interesting. I think the world would burn down if we ever came to this scenario. So it's just very fun to look at and interesting to think about. But the moral of the story is I don't think that UCLA controls their path to the playoff. I think if they win out, they have a pretty good shot depending on what the rest of the country does with their games. But just looking at some of these other conferences, there's just not a scenario at this point where UCLA controls their own destiny to the playoffs because some of these other conferences I think will be ranked ahead of them if all these teams were able to win out, which obviously all these American teams can't win out because they play each other. But let me know down in the comments if this scenario happened and you had UCLA, UNLV, and Tulane win out, who would make the playoffs out of those 3 teams?